The guns would be orbiting, watching for opposition. And above it all, in the command and control, or C&C helicopters, would be the watchful eyes of the officer commanding the operation. The grunts now on the ground would then try to sweep the enemy toward a blocking force. Wherever the enemy stood and fought, they would be pounded by gunships and artillery. Meanwhile, the Loaches overhead would watch to see which way he ran, while Hueys would shuttle back and forth, bringing in reinforcements and supplies. Medical evacuation helicopters, or dust-offs, would carry American wounded back to aid stations. Heavy lift helicopters would fly out carcasses of any helicopters that had been shot down during the assault. The backbone of these air assaults, and indeed of the whole American helicopter effort in Vietnam, were the troop carriers. The Huey rapidly assumed this role throughout Vietnam. Initially designed as an aerial ambulance, the Huey was quickly recognized for what it was, an exceptional multi-role helicopter.
The Army was really lucky that Bell makes a heck of a helicopter. It's kind of a Mack truck, so if you can start it, it'd fly.
It was designed originally in the late 50s or early 60s to transport wounded. But it was just a fortuitous design that once it was put in service, that it was found to have much greater application.
Initially, the A models were sort of a experimental aircraft as far as the UH-1 series was concerned. And the B models, which had the larger engines, the L9 engine, which was 900 shaft horsepower, that was used for, it was designed primarily as a people carrier. And that meant staff or troop transport or whatever. And then later on, as the improvements in the aircraft evolved, then it was converted to, or weapon systems were attached to it. Rocket systems, or the XM6 system, which was 2 M60s on each side. And also it served as medevac. But basically it was designed as a people hauler.
Like any military operation, air assault operations ran into unexpected situations and setbacks when put into practice on the battlefield. When a unit met opposition in an air assault, the carefully planned operation could rapidly become chaos. At times, problems might arise before the helicopters even touched the ground.
They were forever taking pot shots at the helicopters, and even a guy flying it was amazed. He told us he was in a Cobra, and I guess it was the first Cobra they saw. He says, "You're not going to believe there's somebody shooting at me with a pistol." And the Cobras could shoot, I think it was 15 degrees from horizontal, backwards. Basically, 15 degrees off the horizontal thing. So, yeah, they got that guy good too.
The ones that were smart, would jump out in front of the helicopter because the M60s on a slick have a stop and they can't, cover directly in front of the helicopter. And, that was pretty hairy sometimes.
We were out in this helicopter and we were headed down to the Rome Plow. So it's a forest. There's this huge strip out of it. And they flew right down into the strip, so there was like jungle or forest on each side, and we were going down the strip. When you have the gun, what you do is you sit on the edge of the helicopter with your legs hanging out with the gun across your lap, because you're the first one out. Because on a hot LZ or where you're drawing fire, first thing the gunner's supposed to do is jump out, get down, and start laying down a base of automatic fire. So I was out there, I was sitting on the edge of the helicopter with my legs out, right behind the pilot seat, the gun across my lap. And we're cruising through, And I didn't hear anything. It's noisy. You can't hear anything. The wind blowing and the helicopter. And then the door gunner says, well, we just drew fire and we took like 3 rounds in our ship.
The noise of the chopper blades more or less drowns out any shots or anything like that. There may be firing on the ground, but for the most part, you don't know it until maybe a round might pop off the side of a chopper that you're in. So in that sense, noise is a blessing.
It used to be kind of a joke that as soon as, Charlie or the VC figured out that they needed to lead the helicopters a little bit like a duck when you're duck hunting, we'd be in trouble, but they'd shoot straight at it and usually behind it. But they got better as time wore on. The problem with the helicopters going into the PZ or the area touchdown zone or whatever was that they were low and slow and made excellent targets. And in the hovering and the jockeying around and when you get 10 helicopters landing in one area, there's so much rotor wash all over the place that everybody's trying to find out where the ground is and get set down. And the whole idea is you don't really want to be there, so the idea is to touch the ground and get everybody out and move. So it's a bit of a challenge, but that's when you're most vulnerable.
Probably the weapon most feared by helicopter crews was the Soviet-made 12.7 millimeter machine gun, equipped with special sights for shooting at airplanes and helicopters. Just as dangerous was a captured 50 caliber machine gun in enemy hands. Here, captured weapons are shown to an Air Force officer by a sergeant of the Air Cavalry. It was impossible to plan for every problem that might face an air assault force. The biggest and most difficult to anticipate was the level of opposition the troops might find waiting for them once they were on the ground.
There was an enemy contact out northeast of Bongsan, and they were putting companies in to, block this force. They put B Company in, and then the choppers came back to pick us up, and one chopper was coming straight back into the pickup zone. And this chopper got to the PZ and just almost pancaked in, just hit the ground, and the fuel was coming out. The door gunner kind of slid off the chopper and had a big, pants were ripped and obviously had a gunshot wound in his thigh. And I looked at that, and boy, I tell you, even with a helmet on, my hair stood on end, And what had happened was B Company hit a hot LZ.
We were inserted by helicopter into a rice paddy, and we crossed through a wooded area and entered into another rice paddy. And all of a sudden we received automatic fire from the wood side in front of us. Of course, everybody scattered and were advancing, and I stayed in the middle of things. Of course, running and diving as you normally would, good old same thing as you see in the movies. But with all of the fire and all of the incoming and outgoing fire, it was like my mind focused in on one gun in particular. And they were short bursts of probably an AK-47. And it was like every short burst was coming in my direction. And it was like a direct command to dive behind this rice paddy. And as I dove, that bush right above my head was cut down.
They would tell you, expect a hot LZ or don't expect a hot LZ, and so on. And a lot of times, on a lot of those, as we would go into, maybe we're not the first wave down. We're only like a couple times that we were the first ones on the ground. So we might know going in that the LZ's secure. So, but you're kind of looking for where's that place to duck.
You would be choppered to an LZ where, for the most part, they say it's safe, but you don't know for sure. And then from there on, you don't know if you're going to confront a full-scale firefight or not. You just get to cover, and you have one job: get out of the chopper and run.
This is going down into an LZ that you told us wasn't hot. They said there's a division of VC out there. Yeah, right. You know, that LZ was hot. That was the hottest LZ I've ever been in. I mean, shit was flying. It felt like motors was dropping in because bombs was going off. I didn't know if it was ours or theirs. The lieutenant called over the radio. He said, "You're in a hot LZ. You know, get a security force out there quick." Well, I think I tried my damnedest to get the squads out there, and we pretty much did what we could do, but we were taking too many woundeds too quick, too fast. We didn't know where they were coming from. All we did was it's like shooting in the blind, shooting in the bush, and that's all we did. And I was talking to the lieutenant most of the time, you know, that we need some force down here, you know, faster than what we're doing right now. And the lieutenant, he got these helicopters to land. And by the time the rest of the troops came in, you know, we pretty much kind of settled down to take care of our wounded. And that was the first time I lost direct men to firefight, and like I had 4 of them were killed.
In the confusion of combat with an enemy force, firing between American forces could happen. So-called friendly fire is always an issue in military operations.
They were inserting another company, rice paddy away, and of course there's gunships along. And they knew we were there. They asked for us to pop smoke to identify our location. Well, whenever they had red smoke located, that was the location of enemy fire. They would locate us, we would pop a yellow or green or purple or whatever, and they would identify our color for our location on the radio. We were out of any color except for purple. I don't know if the helicopter pilot was colorblind or what. And all of a sudden, here comes the Huey with its miniguns on the side, and all of a sudden, the dirt in front of us just, you know, it was like a freight train coming towards you. This was getting plowed up. He opened fire on our location, thinking that our purple smoke was red smoke. There was a deep water hole behind me. As soon as I saw that, you know, the ground being churned up by the miniguns, as I just dove over backwards into the water, and guys dove in all different directions. The ground right where we were, where all of us were, was chewed up. If we hadn't had the time to dive out of the way, I wouldn't be here today.
The B Company FO was adjusting a white phosphorus round as a marker for Spooky. And the white phosphorus round landed right on our perimeter instead of in the area where the enemy force was believed to have been. And my radio operator was alert. He was on the battalion net, and he immediately started yelling into the radio, "Call off Spooky, call off Spooky." And I could remember looking up and seeing that. It was dark, it was at night, but you could see the lights on that C-47, and you could see him in that turn, just waiting for him to start hosing us down, because if they'd have done that, we'd have had a lot of casualties.
We were laying in ambush one night, and about 3 o'clock in the morning, an outfit come over. We were in 3 Corps, and supposedly they knew we were there. But anyway, outfit came over called Firefly, and it consisted of a couple of Hueys with 12 arc lights on the bottom of them. So they lit the area up like Luna Park, and just shot the hell out of the place. And we ended up with nobody was hurt real bad. It was amazing. But one of the guns they were using was a 20 millimeter and had explosive warheads on it. And they were going off above our heads. They hit the bamboo and go off. So we had a lot of minor wounds. I had one in the heel, and the team commander who went on the operation, he got hit in the calf. And the rest, and we shut off all our flares, and they just kept shooting, so we surrendered. Troops, so help me God. We took our shirts off and stood out there with our hands up. And the guy landed, and the line that we got was expected. He said, hey, you guys are American. I said, mm-hmm, we knew that.
One way in which American forces sought to overcome the confusion inherent in these operations was to establish a command and control helicopter.
What you would have is maybe your commanding officer, he would be in the what we call the CNC ship, command and control ship, and he would be up maybe quite a ways up in the air, and he would basically coordinate the insertions.
So he was in communication with his team on the ground, and then, of course, all of the helicopters' radios, you know, you can overhear the conversation, so everybody knows what's going on. Even the crew members, you know, the door gunner and crew chief know what's going on because they're listening to the radio communication.
In the event a helicopter was forced down, great effort was taken by American forces to recover and repair these valuable machines.
We had just taken off from the flight deck, and we were catching up to the other helicopters. There was 3 in front of us. And we're just going along as normal. And all of a sudden, I kind of noticed that the other helicopters are way ahead of us. We had caught up to them. And I didn't hear anything, I didn't feel anything as abnormal. But I turned around and looked at the gunner, and he just smiled and went like this. We were going down. We had lost the power.
And so they called us and said, could we send some troops out there to guard the helicopter until they could get a repair crew in there to either fix it or pull it out.
They went down through the triple canopy, and we had what we called a bright light team. It was a reaction team standing by, and I inserted them in, and as close as I could, and they had to fight through the jungle. And they got the people out.
We would get out there just as soon as the smoke had cleared, just about, you know, to pick these things up. And helicopters were blasted out of the sky with small arms sometimes. They're all different kinds of things. All it would take is one round in a transmission and freeze it up, and the helicopter flap just drops. I mean, when the main rotor stops, that helicopter is a big piece of lead.
One of the things that the maintenance folks did in the last 11 months that I was there was we'd fly either command and control or standby for downed helicopters. Somebody had a maintenance problem, we would go with the rest of the aircraft to the staging area and sit, and then the other aircraft would go off and do the mission, and we'd wait. And if somebody had a problem, they'd call back. We'd either go pick up a down crew or go fix something that needed to be, if it could be repaired on site.
So they would be in all conditions, you know, from just holes, and sometimes there would be nothing even left that we knew would not be salvageable, and that was pretty much left there. But anything that looked, you know, that was anything of any value at all to it, we'd go down there and kind of clean it up, throw pieces in what we could into the Chinook.
They brought them all back, and we used to scavenge as many parts as we could if the machine was unrepairable. Put the rest of it in a box and mail it back to Texas for a refund, so on the warranty. But
pulling damaged helicopters and planes out of the jungle was not all that heavy lift helicopters did. They were also the prime movers for the air mobile artillery that was the backbone of the Sky Troopers' fire support when they were on the ground. They also moved large amounts of cargo, heavy equipment, numbers of people, and at times had the grisly task of removing the bodies of the dead, both friendly and enemy. But evacuation of downed aircraft or moving supplies was not nearly as important as the vital task of evacuating wounded Americans. This was the work of the medical evacuation, or medevac helicopters, known as dust-offs. In Korea, helicopters had first made a name for themselves evacuating wounded Americans. use of helicopters in casualty evacuation would dramatically increase the survival rates of those wounded in Vietnam.
At that time, the average wound to hospital time was like 17 or 18 minutes. That was amazing.
All the helicopters in Vietnam is what kept our casualties, limited our casualties to only 56,000 people.
The effectiveness of the dust-offs was enhanced by the communication between those on the ground and those in the air.
Sometimes the dust-off people would be alerted through a CNC ship. You might even have a CNC ship above you that would actually take care of contacting the dust-off pilots. But quite often it was you that was having to call a land-based radio operator that would in turn get the people airborne. Once the man was airborne, he would have our frequency, or sometimes we would be given his frequency. Many times, especially at night, you would direct dust-off pilots in by mere sound. You could tell that they were to your south or they were to your right. You'd let them know that they were approaching, that they just flew over. You would communicate as to whether or not you're going to pop a smoke, whether or not you were going to pop a flare, and of course at night, most of the time, a strobe light.
Sometimes they got there too quick.